Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So let's talk about this idea of a free lunch. I'm always amused and slightly horrified when I hear conservatives make this argument about, oh, progressives just want free stuff. Bernie Sanders just wants to get free stuff. He just wants to get something for nothing. Look, the question is, what kind of world do you want? That is the operative question, right? I mean, because, look, I don't arbitrarily move to the left. If I take a position, I'm taking a position because it solves a particular issue. Now, it's just so happened that that particular position is considered to be on the left. I don't care what the position is called. You can call the position a ham sandwich. I'm taking that position for a very specific reason. So let's talk about this idea of a quote-unquote free lunch. So there's a natural societal order. So what I mean is, any particular individual, just take a model, just a person. That person is not born complete in and of themselves. That person has certain needs, meaning clean air, clean water. They need nutritious food. They need shelter. They also need a sense of fulfillment, a sense of self. To the degree that any of these things are missing, that person will suffer. It will present itself in some particular way. Now, let's say we're not talking about just a single person. Let's say we're talking about some arbitrary number of people, meaning a society. To the degree that that society deprives the people of that society with their needs, of those needs, of those requirements, those things are required for a person to be whole, for a person to be optimal, for a person's physical and mental health. If a society deprives those people of those things, that society will suffer. That society will suffer plagues. Now, the degree and the scale of the plague, how bad it is, the things that befall that society, depends upon how the model that that society lives under, how it organizes itself, conflicts with that natural order. Meaning, it's almost as if it puts you in the mind of like somebody, like pain in a body or a physical system. Well, that pain is getting across disharmony. That pain is making this point of, hey, there's something wrong in this particular place. There's a conflict. There's a blockage in the energy. Society functions in a similar way. Society it's almost like it's trying to express the conflict between whatever they're living under, that model, and the reality, or the realities of the things that people need to be whole, to be self-actualized, to be complete. When those things are missing, that society is befallen by plagues, social illnesses, crime, war, violence, depression, illness, corruption for that matter. People like to think that those things are personal defects, that those things are specific to the individual, that they're character flaws. Those things are not character flaws. Those things are indictment of the society that that person is in. You do not have free will. The things that you do, the things that you choose to do, the things that you think, the things that you believe, the biases that you acknowledge, the biases that you don't acknowledge, those things, to many degrees, are cultural. Those things are how you're brought up. Those things are the society to which you are functioning in. You are not a thing unto yourself. You are a bubble of sorts, a reality that's awash in all sorts of other realities in the particular society in which you inhabit. You would have a hard time making a distinction between who you are versus who that society is. They're in many degrees interchangeable. Your values, the things that you believe, even the way that you think, in many respects, is a direct result of the society itself. Those aren't necessarily things that you just all of a sudden came up with. Those things were prodded by that particular society in some way. Now look, it's not fully the society. It's a combination of nature versus nurture. As an individual, you have certain qualities that's associated with you that makes you somewhat unique. So I don't have this belief that everything is nurture. I damn sure don't have the belief that everything is nature. You may have certain impulses. You may be somewhat empathetic or prone to be empathetic. You may be prone to be depressed because of some kind of chemical imbalance. You may get angry faster than somebody else. You may get weepy faster than somebody else. Those things are not necessarily always indicative purely of the society. Those things are indicative of differences within people's chemistry. But that being said, the society plays a very large part in the values, the aspirations, the things that that person believes, the things that that person wants to accomplish, and the things that that person admires, likes, and wants to achieve. So you can't necessarily look at the behavior of a particular person or a particular system and just purely say, okay, that's that person's fault. That's purely a character flaw. We've always looked at things like crime and war and all these other things as being separate and distinct from the model to which we inhabit. Meaning, we're so ensconced in a capitalistic model that we accept the model as if it's benign. That model is not benign. That model has a profit motive. That profit motive literally works off the principle of exploiting those human frailties. So the very things that a human being needs to be complete, the profit motive, the capitalistic system, exploits those things in order to push society forward. Now, this solves the issue of, well, how do we acquire resources? Because look, we do need those resources to survive. You do need materials to build. You do need materials to create clothes. You do need to harvest food and everything else. So capitalism solves that particular issue. But in solving that issue, you have to deal with the concession, or at the very least you need to acknowledge the concessions that you're taking to deal with that issue. The incentive, look, capitalistic model essentially says profit is the highest aspiration of the model, the acquisition of wealth. If the acquisition of wealth is the goal, if it permeates every aspect of our society, then just by definition, reality is subordinate to that mass hallucination. And it is a hallucination. Cash is not real. It functions as a property of the state. So, for the most part, things that is a conceptual figment of the imagination, things that are a principle of the model itself to which we exist, those things are given a higher regard than human life, human suffering, the environment, your relationships. We are subordinate to our own creation. That is problematic. Because those things are in lack in this particular model, you must understand, 66% of the world lives off of $10 a day. A large percentage, like 30-some%, lives off $2 a day. The world, even American society, is in a perpetual state of lack. In so much as those requirements aren't given, in so much as the natural order is not followed, meaning the society does not provide the things that people need to be mentally and physically optimal, mentally and physically healthy. As such, our society experiences illness. We experiences the plagues of the model itself. Now, if we're going to have this conversation about a free lunch, we need to at the very least acknowledge that the societal ills that we're talking about are related to the model. And it's related to the people not having the things they need to be self-actualized. If an individual had the requirements they needed to be fulfilled, I'd wager, strongly wager, and I could even to some degree prove it just by going through how the incentive structure causes each of these ills. Meaning, we've always considered these things intractable and just basic human nature. These things are not basic human nature. These things are intrinsic to the model to which we operate. The fact that people are in lack to such a degree, the fact that people are hungry, not having medical care, have no sense of fulfillment, working a job that they absolutely despise, purely just to make ends meet. Those people are not healthy. What you're seeing in our society, our world, the terrifying reality to which we exist, in which we've normalized, is people essentially experiencing not having the requirements they need to be successful, optimal human beings. That's my argument that I make. Now, if you acknowledge that, if you accept that, which I think it's true, to the degree that the social order is ignored, we will suffer. Suffering, in this case, the social ills are the concessions that we make in order to operate under this model. Now, having a situation where 6 people own more wealth than literally half of the world, 3.5 billion people. If the consequences of 4.5 billion people being in perpetual lack is crime, war, poverty, illness, is that a consequence that you're okay with? Is that a consequence you're okay with? That's the question. The point I'm making to you is it's not a free lunch. It's looking at the world and saying, okay, what do we need to do to have a better world? And to get rid of these particular things that plague us as a society. Now, if you're alright being clobbered on the head or potentially clobbered on the head as you get in your car and drive home, if you're okay with some kid somewhere drinking lead water or water laced with lead because a particular state decided they wanted to save money, then you're in the right system. You're in the right system. Hey, if you're okay with the murder rate being this particular way, if you're okay with people being depressed and dying early because they don't necessarily have health care or can't afford health care, if you're okay with your citizens, your fellow Americans, making the choice between medication and drugs, then again, this is your system. The billionaire stepping across the homeless guy laying on the street in order to get into his limo to go to his third home. That is the model that we exist under. The model itself is the problem. The lack, the not having the human needs, the requirements necessary for a person to be self-actualized. That's the reason why we have these issues. Any honest attempt to address the issues has to deal with that issue. It has to deal with that model. So think of it this way. It's somewhat of a childish argument to believe that everybody can be a billionaire or everyone can be a millionaire. The model doesn't work that way. Wealth accrues at one end. The model itself, just in the typical way that it functions, create a desperate level of poverty, a desperate level of lack. And the longer the system goes on, the more unstable society gets from an economic standpoint and from a social standpoint. So my point is, anything that you do has a concession associated with it. Yes, you can exist in the capitalistic model, but yes, you're also going to have to deal with those ills associated with that particular model. There is no situation where you're going to get everything you want. Hence my point of, you're not going to have 350 million millionaires or billionaires. It doesn't work that way. Think of it this way. And this is probably a pretty decent analogy. I can keep my dog in a cage all day. Meaning I can just say, alright, I'm keeping Pitsu in the cage all day. But when I get home, he is going to be absolutely losing his shit. He's going to be all over the place. Which means that entire evening, I'm not really going to get any rest because he's going to have so much pent-up energy. He's going to bug the hell out of me. Now, if I make the choices, alright, fine. I'm going to spend a little bit of cash and I'm going to take him to daycare. Because at the very least, if he's at daycare, he's going to be able to run around and play and do all this other stuff. So when I get home in the evening, I'm going to be able to rest because that dog can go and sit somewhere and lay down and go to sleep. Yes, I had to put out some cash to handle that situation. But the peace of mind of not necessarily having to deal with the calamity of this maniac dog is amply worth it. It's the concession I'm willing to make in order to make sure that A, my dog isn't necessarily stuck in a cage all day, and B, out of self-interest. That's the point I'm getting at. It's not a free meal. Doing these things, providing those things in a particular system, the progressive model of interaction. And look, it depends on the person. I focus on this path because I try to solve an issue. I look at what's the problem with society. How do you fix the root causes of those problems? How do you make a stable society where we don't have these human and social ills? The concession is that you have to take steps to deal with the root cause of the issue if you want to get rid of those things. It's not a free meal because for the most part, it's self-interest. It's recognizing that paying a little bit more, of making an effort to deal with these plagues on our particular country or planet, makes us safer. It's not just about somebody else, it's also about us. It's not a free lunch. The lunch that you give to somebody else is the lunch you're giving to yourself, or at the very least, the sanity that you're giving to yourself. So, FDR didn't pass the New Deal out of kindness. FDR passed the New Deal because he realized that that model was about to be upended. He made this point that he saved capitalism. And understand why he said that. The guy who, for the most part, did all these worker programs right after the Great Depression, Social Security, Medicare, his people, his class, called him a traitor. FDR's thing was, well, my greatest achievement is that I saved capitalism. FDR full well understood that the model was eating itself. And that if you wanted to have any level of social stability, if you wanted to have any level foot, and understand, even if you wanted to keep the model going, meaning that the capitalistic model purely depends on a burgeoning middle class to buy those items, you're never going to have a situation, regardless of how rich Bill Gates is never going to buy 300 million cars. It's not going to happen. You need a middle class to do that. Insofar as the middle class is hurt and lacking in resources, they no longer have the resources necessary to buy the goods that these people are selling. Because they cannot buy the goods those people are selling, that society at a certain point starts to collapse. The Great Depression probably being one of the good examples. And I would even make the argument that the 2008 crash, to some degree, and the reason why we've been so sluggish in regards to trying to have any kind of comeback. The model is eating itself. It's not a free lunch. If you want to prolong yourself, if you want to keep yourself safe, if for the most part you want a world that is not governed by crime, war, illness, and all these other things, then you need to make certain concessions to make sure those things are resolved, or at the very least greatly diminished. That quote-unquote free lunch is your way of stabilizing the world. That free lunch is not free. That free lunch is just necessary if we want to have a planet where we're not trying to eat each other. Let me know what you think. I've heard conservatives make this argument all the time, and I always think to myself, it's just shallow, childish thinking. Anything that you do has a concession associated with it. Yes, you can have your capitalistic model where people are dying on the street, but people are in fact dying on the street. And even if you don't care about those people dying on the street, you should at the very least care of not getting shot, of not getting robbed, of not getting mugged, of not necessarily having political corruption. Because understand, all these things are aspects of the model. The model incentivizes that behavior. If those people don't have, those people are going to go ill. And look, think of it this way. It's like a physical system. If you yourself as a body was missing a particular vitamin, a particular nutrient, let's say you weren't getting the sunlight that you needed. Let's say you weren't getting the fresh air that you needed. What happens to a physical system when it's missing a particular nutrient? That physical system, to varying degrees, because people are different, but will at some point encounter illness. Social systems are built the exact same way. The illness themselves, however, are expressed as calamity, chaos, people setting fires, people beating people up, people murdering other people robbing other people, political corruption, illness. Those things are principles of the model. Whether you're conservative, whether you're liberal, it doesn't really matter. That model doesn't really care what your political ideology is. That model, for the most part, just says there is a natural order to the way people need to be to persist in a healthy, mental, and physical way. You can have whatever model you want. You just have to be willing to take the concessions. I personally do not want to deal with those concessions, which is why I'm perfectly okay with paying more in taxes. And look, personally, I would go further. But I know everybody is not going to go there with me. The point I'm making to you is, it's not a free lunch. Don't be a shallow thinker. At the very least, be aware that the things that you're doing has an aspect of self-interest, because those things are helping you, whether you realize it or not. Just saying. Just saying. Alright guys, if you like the content, like, subscribe, feel free to share, or look, for that matter, even Patreon. Yeah, feel free to comment. I'm curious to hear an opinions on this one. Alright guys, thank you.